You're listening to the Bulldog Hour, getting you inside the Wilson football program with weekly game previews, recaps, highlights, and interviews. Now, here are your hosts, Joe Mays and Justin Raffoff.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to the Bulldog Hour. I'm one of your hosts, Joe Mays, here with the 10th season of the Bulldog Hour. Believe it or not, here we are, kicking off Season 10, Episode 1. We're going to do a little bit of a winter update here in 2024. It's been about 2 months or so since we had our last show at the end of the 2023 season, and we have a lot to talk about to kind of put a bow on 2023 and then move on here into 2024. And I'm not alone. Justin Raffoff, my co-host, here with me as always. Justin, good to see you again.
Yeah, it's great to be back. I can't believe this is year 10.
I know, right?
I still go back to when this pre-show, when I was just, you were away and I had to send the tweets for you. And I was super nervous, like sitting in the stands.
That was only 1 year before the show came back.
Yeah, that's also crazy.
Well, that is literally 10 years ago. Now we're talking about the 2014 Wilson football season, just a few months removed from when we bring back the show in the summer of 2015. But Justin and I are actually not alone. It's not just the two of us. You know, in the off season, we like to have guests on the program, and joining us this evening is someone that kind of was dropped into our mind last summer, right before the season got started. It was actually something the players said that got our interest peaked when we were doing our senior player interviews. They talked about someone that was coming in to work with their mental health. And I thought it was very interesting. Sports psychology, any kind of science discipline, Justin and I are very excited to learn more about. So when that was dropped, I actually stopped. I was like, hold on, you need to walk me through this. This is brand new information. I immediately reached out to our guest here tonight. Couldn't get the schedules lined up to have her on the show at that time or during the season. But I met her finally in person a few weeks ago at a girls' basketball game, and I was like, this is perfect timing. Can you come on the show?
Absolutely.
And here she is. So Wilson Southern Middle School counselor and sports psychologist Jess Cammauf.
Hello.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
So that was a long-winded intro for you, but there was a lot of build-up. And I actually mentioned on this show during the season how we were excited, that we were hopeful that we could have you on the program because we thought it was so interesting, you working with not just the Wilson football team, but a variety of athletes and programs.
Yeah,
and
there's not a lot of things that the players will say that really stop us in our tracks.
That was one of them.
When they mentioned it, we were like, wait, what?
Well, it mostly not because it was like crazy to think about.
No,
it was
just
we
so
didn't
far
know
off
anything
our radar.
about it.
Right.
We didn't know it was happening.
Right.
Yeah.
And we generally know a lot of what's going on,
Right.
but that was not something that we knew about.
We know more or less. We can kind of know what a lot of the answers we're going to hear in those things because it's like, well, we focus on one game at a time,
Coach.
like that kind of stuff, which is great. That's and then we ask them about they're all excited because they've played with these guys since Van Reed and Lincoln Park. It's a lot of that stuff. But yeah, like they dropped something that was off of our radar, and we're like, we need to follow up.
And I was excited because then I was like, wait, they're listening.
Well, it was great to have an email conversation with you then. We talked about, you wanted to know what was mentioned, and I said, you can listen to the show, you can hear everything they said, and it wasn't just, I think it was it was either Nick Fiorini or Tommy Hunziker brought it up, but everyone just immediately was like, yeah, like this is really important. We're really enjoying this. So that's, I was like, we need to talk to Jess because this is great. So I'm glad we finally got it to work out. Maybe 6 months later, but here we are. And we have a bunch of questions, and we'll get to know you a little bit better, and you can tell us about everything that you do with your counseling job, your sports psychology, and then your work specifically with Wilson football. So
awesome.
Justin and I are going to quick run through a few things here before we do that. First off, we just want to thank our sponsors here at the Bulldog Hour. Primarily, up first is the presented by sponsor of May's Sandwich Shop, and my dad. Always thank him for supporting us since year one. Now 10 years into that relationship. So thank you very much.
Much longer relationship before that.
Yes, really.
Can we use this to write off my 70 cents from Friday?
Yeah, Justin's in debt to the sandwich
I
shop
am,
right
and
now. So.
that is the worst possible.
Pretty
thing
sure
that could
interest
happen.
compounded daily as well. So
I'm sure.
But May Sandwich Shop's not alone. We want to thank White Star Tours, MikeDragosports.com, and of course our 5 anonymous donors for their support of the Bulldog Hour throughout 2023 and here into the beginning of 2024. Justin and I will be back again in about 2 months. Right now, it's penciled in to be Sunday, April 28th at 8:30, and we are working on getting another guest to join us for that show as well. Last thing we want to talk about for the 2023 season was a few of the All-Stars that were released after we did our last show, including Berks County's Player of the Year and Wide Receiver of the Year, Tommy Hunsaker and Edison Case. And then I have the All-Stars here listed on the screen. Our first team all-conference, Tommy and Edison were joined by Jack Dendel. Eddie was actually a two-way first-team selection at wide receiver and defensive back. And then our second teamers go to Logan Kurzweg, Christo Hunsaker, and Jack Dendel. So that was the BCIAA. There were also LL League honors put out. I did post those across the social media. Hopefully you all have seen them. A lot of the same names. A lot of other people recognize as well because the LL League did honorable mentions. So a lot of Wilson football players were recognized for their 2023 seasons. You can find those across social media. Wanted to highlight the BCIAA ones here before we dive into the next topic, Justin. Some stadium updates coming Instashine Field.
You threw me for a loop because I had already shifted my gears to schedule. I'm like, okay,
schedule.
No,
we'll get to the schedule.
Yes. Yeah, I saw you were already on top of it, tagging them in the social media.
That's
posts.
right. You know me.
I actually was not surprised at all because I'm like, of course he would be on top.
Well, it helps that we know Andy. We like Andy.
Of course.
And I'm going to start getting Andy to join the alumni flag football game, which is being organized right now, coming up this fall. I can't believe it's been 5 years since the last one. But Andy's not going to escape this time. We'll make sure he's involved in some way. But yeah, so there are new sponsors in and around Wilson at the athletic facilities, including Gursky Stadium. InstaShine Car Wash in Sinking Spring is sponsoring the name of the field, and signage is already up at the stadium for that. So it's InstaShine Field at Gursky Stadium. Utilities Employee Credit Union is sponsoring the press box, so it's the UECU press box, and also Reading Orthodontic Group and Bachman's Roofing Remodeling Solar is also now advertising on the scoreboard. So I know, Justin, that I believe at the school board meeting on Monday, there was, ratification of this or made known about what was going on. It's where I got some of this information as well. And I know there are a lot of talk about how to use this additional revenue stream. There's talk about scoreboard renovations. And before anyone groans, it would also help offset having to rent a giant blow-up board for graduation, which is a huge
they
price.
bring in those like ones off trailers,
right?
Those
very
are
expensive,
not cheap, right?
Some of this money could not approved yet, could go to scoreboard changes. There's also talk about reducing and maybe eventually even eliminating the activity fee.
Right. Yeah.
So all things that would come back to help the students and families in the district as a result of these sponsorship and advertising opportunities with InstaShine, UECU, Bachman's, and ROG, Reading Orthodontic Group. But actually, I have a mock-up from... Here we go. Let's get that up there. So that's what I don't think that's up yet. Is it? Do you know?
I haven't seen.
Okay.
I haven't looked.
But if you're watching this live, you can see the mock-up for the Bachman solicitation of what the advertising underneath the scoreboard would look like. Pretty standard if you've ever been at any other place that has advertising.
A lot of places who have it like, we'll try and get it the whole way around. Like they're going to try and, like, I think of like a diner menu. Like the placemat, like
exactly,
how it chooses everything.
Or at golf places.
Yep.
Okay. So that was one thing we wanted to point out. I know that broke after our last show, but It is somewhat older news, but we haven't gotten to talk about it yet, so we won't put it out there. But it's nice. The big one is the Insta-Shine one, but it's so nice because it's a Wilson football alumni.
Right, it's in the Wilson football family.
So that one feels.
I know a number of
better.
players work there.
Right, current players are on staff at Insta-Shine. So, all right, and the next thing, I just mentioned the alumni football game. This is the 80th season of Wilson football coming up in 2024, and we're going to be celebrating that with another Wilson football alumni flag football game. Date is TBD. We should be finalizing that in about 10 days or so at the next meeting of the Wilson Football Tradition Club. If you are interested in playing in that alumni flag football game, you need to have graduated with the class of 2020 or earlier. Anyone from the class of 1946 through class of 2020 is eligible. We had some elder statesmen play with us 5 years ago. It was pretty awesome. Not all the way back to the class of 46, but we did at the time. Unfortunately, they have both since passed away. But we had Mr. Lippincott was an honorary captain and helped flip the coin with Bobby Mitzel, who Mr. Lippincott was responsible for the first touchdown in Wilson football history. Oh, wow. And Bobby Mitzel was on the first team that won a league championship in Wilson football history. But we have unfortunately lost both of them since the flag football game in 2019. But anyone that is a football alumni interested in playing, you reach out. I'll have more information coming out on that soon enough. So let's I know everyone's interested in the schedule, but I would like to get into discussing topics with our guests. So we will save the schedule for the end.
We'll talk about that a lot.
And we'll be covering it a lot. I do have a lot of info on it, but I would like to get to our guests and talk about sports psychology and Wilson football. But first off, Jess, let's just get kind of introductory stuff down. Just give us kind of your background, your history. How did you get started?
Sure, absolutely. My origin story is kind of interesting because when I was in high school, I thought that, any type of, I hadn't really heard about sports psychology, but I felt like as an athlete, you're taught to be tough. You're not taught to, talk about your feelings or how you think about your sport. It's all just, going to the weight room or working hard. It's all the tough aspect. So I'm from York County. I was a four-sport. I didn't play softball very well, but four-sport athlete, field hockey, basketball, and track. And I loved basketball, absolutely loved basketball. It was my number one sport. I used to sign my name, first woman in the NBA. I loved it. And I was basically a street ball player. Like I played really out of control. I fouled out of almost every game that I played in. And so I really misunderstood what, kind of being aggressive and being passionate about your sport is. And so I was, I felt a lot of pressure as a basketball player, and I just don't feel like I ever reached my potential. And a lot had to do with the mental side. I was lucky that I was able to play or be decent at another sport. So I did track. I was able to go to Penn State, and I was a javelin thrower there. And because track to me was just something fun to do, it was co-ed sport. It was kind of laid back. I could throw a stick far. Like there wasn't a lot of pressure. And so because I was able to do that, getting to go to Penn State, but it added a whole different world of pressure then, because it was like, okay, Division I sport. And when I got there, I remember my first meet down at UNC, and I completely choked the woman who had thrown right before me. Had this unbelievable throw, and mine was terrible. And my coach came to me and she's like, listen, like, you got to figure this out. Like, this whole part. She's like, I think a lot has to do with your mental part because you're prepared physically. You're prepared in the sport. And she's like, I want you to talk to our sports psychologist. I was like, absolutely never. Like, I was like, I am not meditating under a tree. I'm not talking about it. That's, I think I'm using a quote of my father when I told him I was going into counseling. He was like, oh, that touchy-feely stuff. and that's what I thought it was at first. I really thought, it was just kind of the opposite of what we're taught as athletes. And it was the total opposite experience. It was learning how to be aware of how you're feeling, how you're thinking, what you're thinking about, how you're navigating then those situations. How do you navigate a high pressure situation? How do you cope with, terrible weather. How do you manage and deal with all those things so that way you can physically do the job that you've trained to do? And so I met Dr. Ukelson up there at Penn State, and we worked together, and I fell in love with the whole field. I took every class I possibly could. At the time, there were not a ton of full-time sports psychologists. There weren't a full-time, mental training is still, a really growing field. It's becoming more popular. But it changed my whole aspect, or my whole thought process about sports and what mental training does. And it opened up a whole world to me of what benefits that it can do for you. And so Dr. Ukelson really taught me that, the hours and hours that we spend in the weight room and training and on our skills and our playbooks and everything else that we're working on, if you can't connect mentally and be able to pull out those skills at the right time when they're needed, that's the whole piece that has to be connected. And so because there were not a lot of jobs at the time in sports psychology, and I wasn't going to go live in my parents' basement, I went a little different of an avenue, and I went into school counseling, which I love because I still got to work with kids. I get to coach, which is a big passion of mine. But in the past few years, I really reconnected with being able to do this, mental training. So I started my process to become a certified mental performance consultant, which I just completed this past November. Yay, no more studying. But Drew Kaufman and the entire Wilson athletic department have just been phenomenal because I'd gotten a lot of my experience hours through being able to work with teams, doing team talks at Wilson, being able to work with individual athletes. I have private clients that I see through my business, and it's phenomenal because I love being able to work with different athletes in different sports. And I was lucky enough that Jeremy Palm had reached out this past spring to see if I would be willing to work with the football team, and it was a resounding yes. So I had the Wednesday at 7:30 a.m. slot. So I really, knowing high school boys, made sure that I had a good sprinkling of some discussion, but then also some hands-on. So I tried to come up with a lot of different activities and getting them to move around and not just lecture at them. But really was an incredible experience, and I really loved, being able to bring that mental side, because I think a lot of athletes know that it's there, but it's then how do you engage with that? How do you learn more about those tools and strategies that you need as an athlete?
Well, and then like you said, like having those, but then being exposed to it, and then maybe having a chance to practice and act on that, and then to see results on that, and then it's a lot like those physical things that they practice all the time. That sometimes it's maybe a little more obvious when you're having like gains in the weight room or whatever, but you can see like when it clicks, like man, like I don't know. Yeah, I kept my composure. I was able to like focus on the things I needed to focus on, not get overwhelmed or whatever. It can start to build confidence in those areas as well.
Where were you at before Wilson?
I was at Fleetwood for 9 years. Yep.
Okay. Fleetwood at 9 years. Now you've been at Wilson. You just mentioned certified mental performance consultant. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you.
And you mentioned you're the licensed professional counselor with Wilson. Your work at Southern Middle School.
Yes. I'm a school counselor there. I have students with the last names letters A through L. I love when I say that, and they're like, wait, which letter am I?
Where am I? Well, we mentioned beforehand, unfortunately, you won't be seeing our children at Southern. M and R just doesn't fit in with you, but you mentioned your partner, your coworker.
Yes, Beth Kelly is wonderful. So, yes.
Good. All right. So with your private consulting business, you have worked obviously with Wilson football. You mentioned Coach Palm got you connected with the team there. What other sports have you worked with at Wilson so far?
I've worked with field hockey. I've worked with women's basketball. I have an in there. My husband's one of the assistant coaches. The rifle team, that was probably my most interesting one because I even, and that's the cool part about it, because even if there's a sport that if I hadn't known as much about, it's really cool because then I can dive in and get a real sense of, because there's a lot of similarities as athletes in every sport. The nerves. How do you cope with stress? How do you cope with when you don't do well, when you make an error. But then when you get to learn some of the nuances of those sports, it just makes it even more interesting. Tennis, men's and women's tennis, and then obviously football now. So, and track. I mean, my kids I coach track at the high school, so they just get it no matter whether they want to or not, because they're with me all the time.
That's awesome, though. It's great to see. Again, it's they have that connection within the district, but it shows that coaches are valuing it, and we said you see the players speak positively about it, and it kind of can snowball then, especially when you see, we talk to some of the seniors, you see some of the kids who are going to be the leaders on the team. When they buy in, then you can start to get buy-in too. And in this case, where it's coaches, that also helps too, because we know sometimes the teams have things that are mandated, and the kids go through it and coaches go through it because they've got to go through it. But when you have buy-in, when you have coaches doing things, giving up practice time or
that's
training
the
time
biggest part.
to do these things, that gets the kids' attention, because they're like,
well, yeah, I think once you have coach and players buy into this aspect of your game is just as important as the physical strength portion, the portion that people see, or the field agility or whatever. There's multiple phases, and as long as you're going to dedicate time to all of them, you'll be a better person for it. So that is probably the biggest hurdle, I feel like, over the last forever, but I feel like the hurdle has gotten smaller over the last decade or so. As more people become more aware about how important mental health is for a variety of reasons. So you mentioned that Coach Palm was the one that reached out to you for football.
Yes.
And I know you have an in with the girls basketball team. Has it always been coaches reaching out to you, say, hey, we would like to work with you? Have you ever had students come and say, hey, we'd like to work with you?
On an individual basis, yes.
Okay.
A lot of the athletes who have come, that I work with after, they'll message me after a team talk. So
Okay.
I we'll talk to a team, try to just give some general ideas. Sometimes a coach will then share with me, because Drew would have me come to the coaches meetings every season.
Okay.
And so that's how I got to, get in front of several of our teams. And but it always would happen that somebody would message me, hey, I have this question, or you mentioned this thing, and I struggle with that. And that's something that I think a lot of athletes, and 100% of my clients that I work with individually, they all came, or at least started to come, when they felt that they had a problem. And so a lot of athletes are not coming, when things are going well. And that's why I loved when Coach Palm came to me, because, I worked with them in the preseason. So things weren't going wrong. It was a good time to try out some of these things in the preseason that they felt more comfortable with. Because, it always happens in some in the postseason, I'll get a parent be like, they have a championship game tomorrow, can you help them? And I'm like, this is not how it works. But, if it can be something that, an athlete, and when you have an issue or you are struggling, finding out those tools and strategies to help, but then how do we grow that? How do we get better at that? I mean, Tom Brady, he talked, and it's interesting to me that it's not, it was never really publicized a ton, like Russell Wilson was, like that he had always had he lived with his mental trainer, up until his passing, unfortunately. But then, Tom Brady, they don't really talk about it that much, but he says, like, if he hadn't talked to the sports psychologist in college, he doesn't think that he would have done some of those things, some of those little tools and strategies and tweaks that he had been doing well, but that helped him take his sport to the next step.
Well, and a lot like we see with any of like the training things or all of that stuff, like there is that trickle down effect. Like you think like, oh yeah, I had heard of sports psychology and like the field, but that has become, in my opinion, for like professional sports, that's become pretty mainstream. Like that's a big component of all of that stuff now. And I feel like even in college athletics, especially major college athletics, again, it's kind of like, I don't want to say second nature, but it's there.
Well, it's just another performance coach.
It would be great to see that. Right. It would be great to see that. Like there are negative things that trickle down. It's great when positive things trickle down. Do you see like a big crossover or like maybe some similarities between some of like the pressures that kids have in school, like maybe kids in performance with school or expectations in school, and that you deal with like kind of in that perspective, and then
Yes.
also outside, maybe not even the same kids. It can be the same kids, but like,
Right.
is there a big crossover there?
Yes, and I'm so glad you brought that up and mentioned that because, and I'll talk about the field with certified parental performance consultants. They are now becoming more prevalent in businesses, and surgeons, CEOs of companies are starting, because it's not just sport, it's performance, and so it's academic performance. It's and a lot of when I work with an athlete individually, we always talk about where else can you apply this. If we're talking about neutral thinking, can you apply that before a test or a quiz? Can you apply that before a difficult social situation? And we because the more that they can apply it to other areas, which again, academics can be highly stressful. It just helps them. Well, I studied for all these hours. Now, how can I mentally calm my mind, calm my worries? A lot of athletes, in performance in general, is a lot of just navigating anxiety, navigating worry. How am I going to perform? What am I going to do if I make a mistake or an error, or if I have, I forget some of the information? And so how do you push through that so that way your best performance can be, put forth?
So I've been showing some of the pictures that you posted from sessions
Yeah.
with Wilson. There are three of them up here from Wilson football. One with baseball in a classroom setting. But you mentioned with football you were coming in the morning, which I know the football team's very much used to coming in the morning. I know Coach Palm and Coach Henney have their quarterback session. They did that when I was playing. Well, not them. Well, Chad did, but not in a coaching way. He was there with Coach Catafio and the quarterbacks working out early in the morning. So hopefully that wasn't a big impact for them for you to say, hey, come in at 7:30. I think a lot of them were probably used to that. But you mentioned that it wasn't just lecturing, speaking.
Yep.
It was involved movement. Could you just give us a little bit more information on how you incorporated your sessions with activity?
Absolutely. So I think my favorite, just because they, how they responded to it, was we were working on focus. And so do we have too broad of a focus? Are we focused on all the players of the other team? Are we focused on who's in the stands? Are we focused on, overanalyzing how we're performing? Are we too narrow focused? Are we so focused on our performance that it's taking us away from remembering our plays and our positioning where we need to be? Are we so focused on the other opponent, like who we know we're up against that day? So we were talking about different zones of focus, and I gave all of the guys a card with an animal on it, an animal, just a one word, and they had to then go around and make that noise of that animal. So they were oinking and they were cawing and they were making all the funny animal noises to find each other, and then because they were all spread out in the gym and they had to. I mean, it was so funny to watch, but it was a cool kind of experiment of them being able, well, how do I just focus on this one person? How do I focus, tune out everybody else? And so we just, kind of drew it back into what are the things that they're focused on, and how to cue when they're focused on the wrong things. So the big part about mental performance and training is really noticing. Like, that's my first session with every athlete, is like, what do you notice? Like, what do you notice the night before a stressful game or a game you're nervous about? What do you notice when you're packing your bag and getting your gear together? What do you notice during the day in school before you know you have a game that night? And because a lot of times, kids are so going through, their routine, and they don't really think about that. And some, they don't realize like how much energy they're focused on the wrong things, focused on negativity, focused on what their worries are. But within that, then it's okay. So now, if I'm focused on the wrong things, how do I cue myself to focus on what I need to? What makes me feel better? What are the things that I can use to my advantage, focusing on the facts. I get kids to focus on the facts all the time. Well, I've been practicing, double sessions all summer. I've been in the weight room more this year than ever. I've improved, I've grown. Okay, so focus on those things. And then that's where, mentally you're going to gain your growth and your power from. So that way you can use those the strategies and positive feelings, because a lot of times, when athletes are worried, they're thinking about making mistakes or errors, and then they're not able to perform the way that they've been training.
Interesting. We talked. You worked at Wilson. You've worked with Schuylkill Valley. I saw you worked with was it Westchester Rust? Was it with Ruston?
Yes.
Berks Catholic,
Yep.
Muhlenberg, and Albright College as
Yes.
well. I saw
Yes.
on your sessions posted on your Facebook page for is it Cammauf Sports Consulting?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yep.
So you've worked with a lot of teams and student athletes. Have you ever been approached by a coach for a coaching staff, or is it generally more student based?
It's more student based. There's a girls volleyball team in York County right now that it's more for the coaching staff and the parents.
Okay.
They're a youth organization, more kind of like an AAU.
Okay.
But they've asked me to work with the parents, because they yeah.
Not
No,
to cut you
please,
off, but
please.
no, that's such a big thing, because that relationship between coach, parent, athlete is huge, especially at the high school level, and obviously lower, but like high school level. So like, this popped in my head when you were talking about like focusing, and I was thinking, yeah, if I'm in the stands while they're trying to do that and I'm making my own noises, that's, how do they focus on the things that they need to focus on?
Right.
Because it doesn't matter what I'm doing over
Right.
there. Like that was the example that pops in my head when you're doing that.
Yeah.
And the flip side of that is I coached with someone once who always said this, like, and he'd remind the coaches sometimes before we would be having difficult parent like meetings,
Right.
would be, remember, this parent is doing this because they love their kid and they think they're doing what's best for their kid. So let's keep that in perspective when we have this conversation, and I always thought that was great, because I was young, and like, I'm not confrontational. So I would just sit there as an assistant coach, and you just get to sit there most of the time in those meetings. But like, it's one of those where you're like, okay, that perspective was always good for me, because like, sometimes you as the coach, you might feel like you're getting attacked, or like they're doing what they think is best for their kid.
Right. Right.
And parents oftentimes are doing it because they think
Right.
it's what's best for the kid. And so sometimes if we can get awareness of the situations, like you said, focusing on the things that we need
Right.
to focus on, or that noticing piece. I laugh because, again, as a high school teacher, and I'm sure in the middle school and as a parent, we talk about how unself-aware kids are. And then I throw this around a lot, though. I'm like, yeah, I know a lot of people, including myself, that can be fairly lacking in that area at times as well. And so
we tell them what to do.
Right.
Kids, and I,
Right.
it's as teachers we tell them what to do. As parents we tell them what to do. As coaches we tell them what to do. And so a lot of times, when they get to their sport or school or all of those things, it's how engaged are they with what? I mean, I even struggled with that after I was done with training, because my whole life I was told how to work out, and I was like, I remember being like 22, and I'm like,
Now
so
what?
do I do now? Like, I just go to the gym.
Where's
and-
my guidance?
Right.
and we talk about intention with that, and having, what's your intention today? And I don't think it takes away from the fun of sport. I think it does the opposite, because if you're more engaged and you see more of your value in your practices and what you're actually spending these hours doing, then you're going to see more growth. You're going to see improvement in yourself, and it's really setting those goals that are not just outcome based. It's not just oh my gosh, the first question you ask any athlete, did you win? Even as youth athletes, and I feel like that question, and yes, winning and losing matters. I understand that. But especially for our youth athletes, when they're learning skills, when they're learning how to play, when they're learning how to compete, you could play your best game and still lose. You could play terrible and still win. And so I think that really, that mind shift of your own intention, your own goals on your process, well, I'm going to make sure that I get all my plays today. That's my focus, and I'm going to be in the right spot, because that's the way that you're going to be able to focus and contribute as to your team in that situation. And so I'm hoping, by helping athletes shift some of that focus and shift where their intention is, they're going to have quality practices, and they're going to have a better experience of their game. It's not just, the win or the lose.
Yeah.
That's fascinating to me, because I've said this to him a million times. Like, I didn't really grasp that well until I was like coaching. Like, coaching helped change my perspective of, we may play our best and lose. As when I was an athlete, I did not handle that part well.
Right.
Like I didn't have that perspective, and I can still struggle with it in my fandom. But like,
Sure.
Yeah, don't ever watch our other show.
yes, it is. Yes, that's where it came, where I was like, I don't know if she knows what she's getting us into. But like, yeah, like I feel like and some of that's just getting older, and
Sure.
and then you coach, and then as you're a parent, and like you just get different perspective on things.
Right.
But yeah, like athlete me struggled with that, and I wasn't, a premier high school athlete by any stretch. So like, but being able to give these lessons to youth and to high school kids is so beneficial, because like you said, we talk all the time about the things they learn in sports help them in so many fields. That's why it's so important.
Right.
Like for many of us, why we're so involved with those things as the true extracurricular things,
Right.
because it does teach them those lessons. And this is the same. It teaches them those lessons that they can apply here and everywhere for the rest of their lives.
Right. Right. That's the goal.
I want to focus now mostly on your work with the football team.
Sure.
When you were approached by Coach Palm and you came in for the first session, did you feel that the students were receptive to what you were trying to do? Did they seem focused and open to it, or was it something they're like, oh, it's just another thing they want us to do? Like, what were their attitudes towards you?
I think, it was very beneficial that I had a lot of them as students at Southern. So I think, and them knowing that I'm around sports, and, I'm a coach, some of them are on my track team. And it's really, that was a big benefit. And it's like everything, you have kids who are super engaged and super focused, and then other kids who kind of were in the middle. And I felt when the season progressed, or, summer progressed, and especially when I got to meet with them in smaller, groupings, I felt like that's when the magic happened, because then they could speak, to some of their own personal things. Because again, I would always try to come up with topics, neutral thinking, becoming 1% better, how to cope and manage with stressful situations. But, that's something that I think all athletes, work on. But when they could ask specific questions and when they could engage for them personally, that's really when I felt like the most, the most positive experience came out of, our work together, for sure.
I know you worked with them throughout the summer. Mm-hmm. Did that linger into the fall at all? Did you have any contact with them throughout the season?
We did, I think 2 or 3 sessions once the school year started. And then just like we always talk about, the time management of everything, it got very difficult. My own kids, both of my boys played football this year. So, but we were just the beginning of the season, and then, a couple times throughout when Jeremy had asked me to follow up.
And were you able to, or were you asked to follow up with them in the postseason or after the season was over? Was there like a finalization to the 2023 season with you? Is that something that was approached?
We actually didn't, and that's a great idea, because this was our first year doing it, and definitely came away with a lot of ideas, for future teamwork, and that's definitely a great idea. Yeah.
And will you be working with the 2024 team, do you think?
I don't know. Coach Palm, where you at?
I didn't know, I know he came to you at end of last spring to talk about summer stuff.
Yeah.
I didn't know if that was something that you had talked about, if that was going to continue and be a, just another part of the routine that
Right.
that comes about. Are you working with anyone right now at Wilson?
I have a bunch of individual clients. And I know, and talks with a couple teams in the spring, and my track kids.
Why do you think for the student athletes in high school, the sports performance, sports psychology is so important for them right now?
I think because, we know that growing up now is different, and we know it's harder with social media, with the expectations, with pressures. And I think all of the things that they can learn through, becoming aware of themselves and what they're thinking, what they're feeling, how to manage those things, how to cope when things don't go our way, how to cope with failure, how to cope with losses. It's just such a life skill that if they can start to feel comfortable with these things, if they can become habits, and if they can feel comfortable before things get even more stressful, before the things in college, disappointments in college, or, rejection of a job, a big breakup, those sorts of things that I know we're talking about sports, but they're all parts of just, feeling good about yourself and your self-confidence and your self-worth, self-value. And I just feel like that's so important for kids, especially now with our, social media age and some of the distorted views of social media. But if they can learn some of those things now, I just think it's so important for them moving forward.
Do you have anything else, Wilson, specific that you wanted to ask? I have another question or two, but it's not specific to Wilson. So,
not off the top of my head. If one pops up, though, I'll circle back.
Okay. I want to take a step back because I missed one when we did your intro. I just wanted to ask you talked about how you were an athlete at Penn State and how you kind of got shifted in this direction, becoming a counselor, but focusing on. So you're really interested in the sports psychology aspect of it. You mentioned the coach that helped you kind of have that epiphany. But what about now that you've been, you're established in your career field? Are there any professional influences you have? Other people that have helped guide you on this path? Mentors? Anyone? Even not necessarily someone that you've actually worked with, but someone you've read in
Books
a book
I should read.
Yes, I'll give you the list. So my absolute favorite, and please, anybody who's listening, if you're involved with sports, Ken Ravizza. He is unbelievable. He unfortunately passed away several years ago, but he heads up baseball 2.0, or his books. And he just, anything you can find of his on YouTube, he just has such a laid back, cool, perspective. His baseball was his main thing, but he did a lot of work with the Cubs the year that they won the World Series. But he's such an interesting influence and just a feel good kind of guy. Like I was like, I want to play baseball after I read his book and see any of his videos. Cintra Cammauf, she's, very big in our, sports psychology world right now. And she's worked with a lot of Olympic athletes, which is, always, I have such a big interest in the Olympics because, professional athletes get paid. I've now known several, people on the Olympic hopeful path who they're driving Uber, they're working at Dick's Sportings, they're working at Starbucks, and they don't have, they're still doing all that hard work for the love of the game. And that's what's so cool to me about, our Olympians, my little side plug.
I get it.
This being an Olympic year too, I get excited.
And the biggest question I have for you.
There is a right answer.
Justin knows where
there
I'm
is a
going
right
with
answer. I know what it's going to be.
Winter or summer?
Oh shoot. Okay. Oh shoot. So I was at the
We're
Summer Olympics
opposite,
in Atlanta in 1996.
You were?
I was.
Oh,
yes.
that's awesome.
Yes. But I trained for skeleton for a
Oh,
little bit of
man.
time.
She's
She's on Team Winter. Team Winter.
No.
Yeah.
I have love for both. I do have love for both.
No,
Fool me
I-
because I'm like, javelin, I've got this locked up.
and I agree.
It's a great question.
I love the Summer Olympics too, and
Yeah.
actually,
They're better.
when I lived in Indiana with my wife, which she was getting her graduate degree at Purdue, and I was out there working at the climate office on campus and other jobs while she was learning, and that was in 2008 when the Beijing Olympics happened. But the two of us are out there with like not knowing anyone else, so we watched every single minute of the Beijing Olympics. Now, of course, it helped that Phelps was in all those races and trying to break records and everything. So, and she loves the Summer Olympics. That is her jam. When the Winter Olympics come around, she's just like, yeah. And I'm the opposite. Like because I love ice hockey. Ice hockey's my thing.
My husband just watched Miracle again.
Again. I just watched Miracle again. It's the best.
You may have buried the lead here though. You trained for skeleton?
Yeah.
I feel like that's not
And
like
that
a
hasn't
detail
even-
just
that was
glossed
only
over.
brought back in the last like 12 years or whatever.
Oh my
that had
gosh.
been banned for a while.
Yeah, it was crazy.
So
it was
yeah,
crazy.
let's- wild.
Yeah, he's right. We did kind of push that under because I was just so excited that someone actually agreed.
Yeah,
that they
because you
liked
knew
the
when she
winter-
dropped that, you were winning.
Right, when she was like, "Well, I went to Atlanta in '96, but I knew it. I had it." So
As she also
Yeah.
gets a glimpse at how competitive we actually are.
okay, so
awesome.
yeah, so you trained for skeleton?
I did. And the crazy part was that I trained for 2 years before I actually even did it. And so, because you had a combine, I was 20, I think 27, 28. And you had a combine. It was my husband and I went to Lake Placid for vacation, and we went on. I was like looking for different things to do, and it said, "Did you ever want to be an Olympian?" And I was like, "Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
totally.
absolutely."
Yeah.
Like my whole life. And so I randomly filled out this questionnaire. I had to do a 40 time, a bench, a couple random things, and then they invited me up in the summer for a summer combine. So I got to run the track. I got to live at the Olympic Training Center
That's awesome.
for a week, just for a week. But still, it was like the coolest experience. Even the toilet paper rolls had the rings
The
on.
Olympic rings. Wow.
And but I got to train on the summer track. I got to meet Olympians, like they were there legit living and training. And Alana Myers, she's still competing now and has 2 kids, which is she's just like mom goals for bobsled. And but then I got invited to come back in the winter and do it. So it was pretty cool. I went 70 miles an hour head first. They did not tell me my first time going the whole mile track that the guy in front of me had he'd hit his face and broke his nose, and so there was blood. Like I'm up on the side of the bank, and I just see this red streak, and I was, oh my
was
gosh!
that?
So thank goodness nobody told me, so we got to the bottom. So
So
yeah.
we could do an entire show talking about you
I'll be back.
training
I'll be back.
Yeah, I mean that honestly that'd be perfect for our other show.
Oh my gosh.
That is bonkers.
Listen, you guys know when you're an athlete or you love sports, like it doesn't die,
Yeah,
it doesn't
well,
end.
so
it just
when you
morphs,
had
it
to-
changes.
When you had to fill out that like questionnaire, was that were they looking for former like collegiate athletes? And it didn't have to obviously be related to ice and going downhill.
Yeah, I mean a lot of
they wanted sprinters or track and field people. Or
they had no prereq.
no prereq.
No prereq. But I think saying that I did track helped.
Probably helped,
A
yeah.
lot of track athletes. I mean, we've had some
Yeah,
people who do
sure.
summer and then
100%,
do
yeah.
Right. It's almost like for something like that, they're like, let's see your like ability to
Yeah.
train and all this stuff.
Yeah.
We'll teach you the skills that we
Right.
want
Right.
to teach you.
Right.
But, yeah.
Well, it's like the Jamaican bobsled team,
Exactly.
like the Disney
Right.
movie. They
I was
didn't know
just
how to
thinking,
bobsled.
I'm like, oh my gosh, Austin's never seen Cool Runnings. I was like, we've got to watch that soon.
Okay, add it next week.
Yeah.
right after Miracle.
Right, exactly. Dom's usually shows it as he builds up on the Jamaica trip. He'll build up this documentary he has for the kids,
Oh my god.
like Jamaican documentary, and then he shows it the one night.
Oh man. Okay, you blew my mind
Sorry.
there.
Yeah.
But I kind of blew right past because I was so excited to find someone that also enjoys the Winter Olympics like I do. But that's crazy. So, did you ever have any like close calls? Did you have any like, oh boy, that was, or did it go bad ever?
They start you off on a quarter mile, and I remember calling my husband that night, and I was like, I don't know if I can do this. The G force on your head and your neck is like unbelievable. And he was like, listen, you trained this whole time. You got to do it. So, but no, it was very cool. It was a very cool experience, but it was at a point where, unless I was willing to change my entire life, like travel and, I was like, for a chance,
Right,
100.
right.
And I think that was, I got to see and meet a lot of those people who really did give up everything and then not get to go. There's a woman actually local. She's in Denver, and she's now tried for 3, I think, and has been like the 4th person and didn't go. And
Do they only take 3?
It depends on qualifications.
Okay.
So yeah, it's typically like 2 or 3 kind of, and it's a whole, point system and everything and trials and stuff. But yeah.
Well, I mean, I think that's a great place to end. We got a few minutes
Throwing that
left.
tidbit in there.
I want to jump to the schedule because I know people want to hear about that. But that was fascinating. Both the little personal life tidbit there at the end. Didn't think that's where that was going. But excellent discussion on your career and mental health and sports psychology. If people want to hear more from you, where can they find you online?
Absolutely. So Facebook, I'm a Google, which is exciting. I always get excited if you put in, sports psychology close to me. My name will come up. But Jess Cammauf, Facebook page. I'm on the Wilson email too, and I can just share my. Can I share my personal email?
Oh
Is
yeah,
that okay?
as long as you're okay.
Oh, 100%. J Cammauf, so JCAMMAUF @gmail.com. I never had to spell my name till I got married. So,
So we appreciate you joining us.
Thank you for having me. I was very excited to come.
And we're always looking to have guests on both shows. I mean, now that we know we've got an Olympic aspect, we could certainly have you come up on the other show that we do outside of high school football season. We'll have to keep that one in the back pocket for when Winter Olympics come up again in the future. Yeah, but like you said, we got summer this year, so so definitely check out Jess's. I know you have the Facebook page. You have a website though too, right?
Yep.
To go over the sports the sports psychology, the consulting.
Yep.
So check that out, and if you are a coach, reach out to her.
Please.
If it's something that you've never tried before, definitely recommend talking to Jess and see what she can do to help your program and help your student athletes.
Thank you.
So, all right, Justin, we got a few minutes here at the end. I do want to quick go to the schedule stuff because that was kind of something that, like you said before the show, was just finalized a few days ago. So let's.
Yeah, that never happens with our show. These things always happen a few days after the show.
Right, yeah, or months before, and then we forget to talk about it. But no, the 2024 schedule was just finalized like Wednesday this week, and I did get confirmation that everything that's posted is correct. I didn't want to put anything out there that was wrong. So yes, Wilson does only have 4 home games this year. We will be on the road 6 times. Of course, last year
we're away for the scrimmage this year too, aren't we?
Yes, at Coatesville. So we got a lot
That's
of
a
bus
beautiful
trips.
field, though.
Oh
It's
yeah,
a beautiful field.
Yes.
Justin and I got a lot of road trips this year coming up.
I'm gonna remember my sunscreen for that one.
That's wrong. Yeah, that was brutal 2 years ago. So last year we actually ended up having 6 home, 4 away. Now that was because of the heat issues with Martin Luther King. The Philly Public Schools canceled, and our replacement was Cheltenham, and they came to us. That was supposed to be a road game. So last year we were 6-4. This year we're 4-6, trying to find a game for the 3rd week of the season, Friday, September 6th. That's the one that was the holdout. It's been finalized. So we'll start at the top, though. We are keeping Cheltenham on the schedule. So the emergency heat replacement last year, they've become now an opponent. They are week 1. It is away. So we're going to Cheltenham on August 23rd before coming home on August 30th to
now,
play.
Will that be at the super site?
I have that info in just a few seconds here. Plymouth Whitemarsh is game 2 at home. So that's the first game at Instashine Field at Gursky Stadium will be Plymouth Whitemarsh. Then game 3, the big one that we were waiting for, and we are going to Nazareth area, northeast of Allentown. Game 3 on September 6th. Then the LLE schedule starts the next week. Game 4 at Reading High. That game has been moved back to Friday. It had been previously announced it would be Thursday, the 12th, because of an official shortage that every team was going to have to play at least one Thursday or Saturday game this season because of the LL League having an official shortage. Things worked out, I think, with Berks officials, and because this is a Berks on Berks matchup, both schools were able to get it moved back to Friday. So Wilson Reading High at Albright will be Friday the 13th. Game 4.
Nice press box there too.
I don't ever get to see the press boxes for all that long, at least. Then Game 5, Cedar Crest, September 30th. That's at home. Then Game 6, technically non-league, still LL, and obviously huge rival. Governor Mifflin is at Mifflin and on a Friday this year. We're not homecoming on a Saturday like 2 years ago.
In a hurricane.
So Friday, September 27th at Mifflin. That's Game 6. Come home, Game 7 for Hempfield, October 4th. Go to Penn Manor, Sugar Bowl time, October 11th,
Yes.
Justin. Circle that one. Penn Manor, Game 8 away, October 11th. Game 9 and senior night at home on October 18th against McCaskey. And then the regular season finale, Game 10 on the road in Neffsville at Manheim Township on October 25th. Now, since it's a new 2-year cycle, we do not know if that first weekend in November will be a bye like it's been the last 2 years for 6A. Because we don't know how many teams are making the playoffs in 6A yet, because there are more teams in 6A now because of the PIAA reclassifications.
Right. Didn't we say it wouldn't surprise us if they went to 12?
So currently it's at 8. They could possibly go to 10 or 12, maybe.
Right.
Some of the other classifications
top
do
seeds
that.
Still get by.
So then top seeds would have a bye that week. So it all depends.
Right, that's just a speculation.
District 3 hasn't finalized that. Right. But so there's 4 Fridays in November, the first 8.
Well, wasn't it last year? We didn't know till like halfway through the season.
2 years ago.
Okay,
we first realized there was a bye. Yeah, that was 2 years ago. So the first 4 Fridays in November would be district playoffs, but we don't know if that's happening yet. Not,
depending on where the game is.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of stuff, but the dates on there would be the 1st, 8th, 15th, and 22nd is the likely date for the District 3 6A championship, which would be at the lower seeded school, or the lower number school, the better team that's left by seed. So I would want to just quickly focus on games 1, 2, and 3, since those are more those are different opponents than we're used to at Wilson. Oh, and why is Central Dauphin not on there? They've been on there the last 10 years. Where did they go? That has nothing to do with Wilson or Central Dauphin, really, at least directly. Central Dauphin had to drop us from the schedule because their conference, the Mid-Penn, did realignment, and they're now playing 9 league games.
They have 9 league games now.
So they only have 1 non-league game, and it just couldn't make it work. Right. So unfortunately, for the first time in a decade, Central Dauphin is not on the schedule. Right. So that's why there's big upheaval in the first 3 games of the season for 2024 and 2025. So Cheltenham is our first game, August 23rd. It's away. That is being held at their campus. Okay. The stadium is at 500 Rice's Mill Road in Wyncote. That is north of Philadelphia. So they are for this cycle, a 5A team. They're in the Suburban 1 American. They are still led by head coach Troy Gore, who was the head coach this past season when we played them. They finished 5-6 last year, and they lost in the District 1 first round to CB West. Series history, not a lot. Played once last year, the Heat replacement game.
Played once/twice.
Well, yeah. So they came to our place on Friday. Or no, they didn't.
Saturday.
They came to our place on Saturday, got rain delayed to Monday, which also had a rain delay in it. Wilson ended up winning that game 40-26. They were the replacement for MLK. The Philly Public Schools had canceled games because of heat issues, heat advisories. Cheltenham over the last 5 years is 33-20. They've made the playoffs 3 of the last 5 years, but back in 2019 they went 14-2 and were the 5A state runner-up. You're going to sense a theme here from these teams that Wilson's playing the first few weeks of the year. Game 2, a newbie as well. Plymouth Whitemarsh coming to Instashine Field at Gursky Stadium, August 30th, home opener. And the first ever meeting between the schools. Plymouth Whitemarsh is a 6A school out of Suburban 1 American. Their head coach is Dan Chang. They were 9-2 last year, and they lost a Division 1 quarterfinal playoffs games to Westchester Ruston. However, in the last 5 years, they are 40-12, have made the playoff every year but the weird COVID season that is like the giant asterisk for everyone. 9-2 last year, I mentioned. They've won 9 or 10 games 4 of the 5 years. The only year that they didn't was in 2020. So That is Plymouth Whitemarsh, the Colonials coming to Gursky game 2.
And it's only getting tougher in the next
And
one.
then we go to game 3. Got the Nazareth area Blue Eagles, September 6th. That's Friday, up at Nazareth. One Education Road, Nazareth, PA, just northeast of Allentown. That's where the game will be played. They are a 6A school in the Eastern Pennsylvania Conference South Division. Their head coach is Tom Falzone. Last year, they were 12-2 and the District 11 champion. And who did they get to play in the state playoffs? St. Joe's Prep. They lost to them in the PIAA 6A quarter. You're going to sense a theme there. The last 5 years, the Blue Eagles are just simply 49-10. They have won 3 District 11 championships.
Yes, that would add up to 59 games in 5 years, including a COVID year.
Including the COVID year where they finished undefeated as district champs because District 11 pulled out of the PIAA playoffs that season. So they didn't even get to continue what could have been one of their best seasons of the ones we're mentioning. But 12-2 last year, 9-2 the year before, 7-4 in 2021, 9-0 in 2020, 12-2 in 2019. They've been on quite a roll. They're a great program. Penn State fans know one of their famous alums recently, Jahan Dotson, is a Nazareth area Blue Eagle alum. Series history, much like Cheltenham, Wilson, and Nazareth have only played once. It was way back in 1995. The second game of the season was a huge Bulldogs win, 61-21. Wilson rushed for 474 yards and 7 touchdowns. And Justin, who's that a picture of?
Oh man, is that Jamie Sands?
That is Jamie Sands, current Wilson coach Jamie Sands. He was the leader of that running back trio. Actually, there might have been 4 guys who scored touchdowns in that game. My favorite thing from researching this last Nazareth game was Nazareth, I don't think, was quite a strong program back then. Wilson was pretty good under Coach Jerry Slemmer at the time. In the Allentown area paper, the Friday leading up to the game, they had a little blurb. Nazareth at Wilson West Lawn. 2 words of advice. Stay home. Wilson West Lawn 45-7 was the prediction. Wilson won 61-21. It says host Wilson ran roughshod over non-league foe Nazareth, racking up 474 yards in the rout. Leading the charge for the Bulldogs was Jamie Sands, 10 carries, 225 yards, who scored on runs of 41, 57, and 95 yards, the latter breaking the school record of 94. So, yes, assistant coach Jamie Sands knows about the Nazareth area Blue Eagles, and he has a good memory of that game.
Yes.
So hopefully Wilson can keep that up. But they are really good right now. They have really turned a corner, and that's a tough. District 11 is a tough place to play football.
Yeah.
When you talk about Parkland, always having an incredible
Easton,
Emmaus,
Liberty,
Bethlehem, Liberty, Bethlehem, Freedom. Yeah, there's a ridiculous amount of talent up there. Not to mention Becca High, and they all get to play each other in the regular season. I know they'll be separated, a lot of those, when you get to the playoffs. But yeah, it's quite a lot of talent coming through Nazareth recently, and that will be Wilson's Game 3 foe, Friday, September 6th, up in Nazareth.
Yep.
So that's all the schedule talk we have now. The other ones, the LL, we'll talk about them more over the summer, but everyone's pretty familiar with the Lancaster-Lebanon teams at this point. The only difference this year is you flip-flop home and away. It stays the same week. No real changes there. So once we get into week 4, everyone's pretty familiar. But
like
we'll
you said, back
those.
to the Sugar Bowl.
Back to the Sugar Bowl. Returning to Penn Manor. It's a tradition of Justin and I before and after the game.
Yeah, there's a sandwich
I'm familiar.
shop place.
Familiar.
Okay.
Yes,
okay.
we would have a track meet at Millersville.
Yeah, there you
and
go.
so we would just.
The last few years, we've gone before and after the game.
I have not done that.
Just putting it out there for
that.
our wonderful and lovely anonymous donors. Last time, someone paid for our food at the
Yes.
Sugar Bowl,
Yes.
which was pretty awesome. And that had never
exactly.
happened before.
Did you get a milkshake?
We haven't gotten milkshakes.
Stop it.
Oh,
okay, next time.
Now we got it.
All right, put it on the list.
Put it on the list. Yeah, because we always I think, do we get pizza before or we get pizza after?
I usually get pizza after.
Yeah, we get pizza after. We get a sandwich and fries and stuff before. Then we go and hopefully win.
I remember 2 years ago when we went, and people were like, "Oh, you guys weren't just saying that. Like
No,
you're
we're not
here." We're
lying.
like, "No, we're here." Yeah, again.
we saw Wilson fans and alumni before, and we saw Wilson fans and alumni after. And it was like, wait, didn't you eat here? Yes, we did.
That's great.
And we're eating here again.
That's great.
Yes.
So, all right, Justin, anything else for this season 10 premiere episode?
No, it's crazy that it's season 10. But it's going to be March by the end of the week, and next thing you know it,
Thank you.
spring sports starts next week,
Yes,
and
they do.
Monday, March 4th.
officially start next
Yep.
week, and that spring season can be like a whirlwind because
Yes.
you get like, oh, it's still winter, still winter, still winter. Oh, postseason.
Yes.
You know,
Oh,
like
now it's summer.
90 degrees.
Yeah, so
You have to pack clothes for every
Yeah.
possible weather outcome.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. The inverse of the fall, where you're like, oh, it's 90. We have heat cancellations, and
Right,
Martin Luther King can't play.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden, we're at Cumberland Valley, and it's like 15 degrees. Feels
there
like
was
15.
there was ice on top of the press
Yeah.
box. There was ice.
Oh yeah, what great. This is
Guys, like, watch your step. I'm like, thanks.
about what? Yeah. So, well, Jess, thank you very much for
Yes,
joining
Thank
thank you
us.
very much.
Thank you.
I hope you had a good time.
I did.
We appreciate you joining us, and I'm glad that we were able to connect and get you on the show. And it sounds like we got a lot of other stuff we could talk about. So we'll have to,
Anytime. I will
you
come back anytime.
You know, maybe later this summer. You know, if you're working with the team again, we can connect on this show. You know, sometime in August. That's really when things are ramping up, and we get a lot of good feedback on the program then. But you know, Justin and I are always doing some kind of show, and
I'm telling you though, she comes on the other show, it's going to start to be billable hours because like the lid comes off and it just, oh my gosh,
yeah,
those are much more vent sessions.
Oh, okay.
Well, see, you're dealing with sports fandom at that point,
Right,
Well,
exactly.
Listen, so my husband's a Bills fan. Yes, and I'm an Eagles fan, so there's a lot of stuff in our house.
But you know, with the Bills, I have tough time with the Buffalo Bills.
Yes.
So, but I've been dealing with Eagles stuff for a
Right.
long time,
Right.
long time.
Well, listen, I want to thank you guys for the invite, and thank you guys for doing this for Wilson's, or you know, the athletes and everything that you guys put into this. This is unbelievable. This is really cool. So I appreciate all the hard work, because I mean, you guys are so professional. So like, you guys know so much stuff. I was like, how does he know all that stuff?
Well-
But the amount of research you put into it is just unbelievable.
We do good with smoke and mirrors.
No, you guys are
Fool
awesome.
some of the people all the time.
That's right. So, but we appreciate your kind words, and we thank you. And honestly, I don't want to speak for Justin, but I think we're on the same page that if we had more time
Oh,
and money, we would we would do a lot more Wilson related stuff. But jobs and family responsibilities
100%.
barely allow us to do the football one. So as much as I
Thank
would
you.
love to focus on a variety of other Wilson extracurriculars and endeavors, right now we got to stay focused.
right.
Otherwise, we will lose time elsewhere in our lives. But yes, thank you, Jess, for
Yeah.
joining us. This was awesome. I'm glad we could get together after that being dropped on us during our student senior player interviews. It's just, that was great. I remember immediately. As soon as I finished that interview, I was like, I'm going to email her right now. So that's great. That's great. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, Justin. Anything to say before we go?
No.
All right, sounds good. All right, well, for Jess Cammauf and Justin Raffoff, I was Joe Mays. We will be back in about 2 months, April 28th, for episode 2 of the 10th season of the Bulldog Hour. That's it. But until next time, remember, go Bulldogs.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the Bulldog Hour. Want more Wilson football? Follow the show on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Subscribe to the podcast on iTunes and SoundCloud. Or visit www.bulldoghour.com. The Bulldog Hour is a featured program on jmnjrradio.com.